Hey everyone, it's Josh Andrew here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Josh Andrew. We're all about leadership, having meaningful conversations, and getting just a little bit better every day. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing your great content. Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's get into this week's episode. Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. This week we're going to be talking about a couple ideas or strategies that I think aren't going to be as effective in 2025 for churches. I do believe these methods or concepts do fit other models outside of the church, whether you're running a business, whether you are leading a team in your church. I believe some of these principles or ideas, to be honest, I think apply everywhere, but these are more bigger ideas or strategies anyways that I believe churches have prioritized. And again, I just want to have some couple caveats here. This is just my opinion. I think obviously God builds his church. There are some pretty clear, obvious things that are never going to go away. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there has been some methods that if you've seen any sort of wave over the last 5 years, in my opinion, there are some things that are slowly dying out. To be honest, there have been things that have been dead or have stopped being effective. And there just been some people or leaders anyways who've been married to these methods. And I just want to say, again, this is just my opinion. This isn't necessarily an absolute truth. What I'm saying, this is just a blinker for you to be able to say, maybe I should think about and pray about not focusing on these specific things. So we're just going to jump in. And again, I believe that this is going to add tremendous value to you. And my hope is that this doesn't drastically alter anything in your life. I just want you to think about some of these things because I'm thinking about them as a church leader as well. Number one of the overarching strategy methods that are going to be in the decline or not as effective in 2025, number one is event-centered focuses. Okay, so this concept of event-driven ministry where programs or events are just packed into our calendar for the sake of activity, I believe is losing its relevance. I believe this era of if we do a lot of things, we're going to be more effective. If you apply that principle to any other concept of any other market, let's say just to remove the spiritual component, it's a market that doesn't work. Just activity doesn't mean growth. Activity doesn't mean effectiveness. Activity is usually a sign that we think busyness or just having a full calendar is effectiveness. People in 2025, again, in my opinion, are going to be more drawn to mission-oriented communities that offer depth and purpose. A strategic shift from simply filling seats at events to fostering lasting spiritual growth and community impact will likely be the future. So what does this mean? You doing 6 conferences a year, you doing 4 nights a week, you have stuff at the church, you have things that you're requiring from your leaders that they have to be at every single thing. I'm just telling you, in my opinion, that's not going to be as effective as you think. I don't think this has been an effective strategy for years, just focusing on events. Something that's really interesting if you look at youth ministry is a lot of youth ministries or youth pastors anyways put on these conferences every single year. I don't think they're as effective as we think. And again, I'm just hoping that we can just be honest about our why of why we do those things. This is a sign that it is not effective. If you're doing a conference to get 3 preachers that you want to know at your conference, that is not effectiveness. That's not the goal here. The goal is not to get in the right rooms. The goal is not to just honestly have big events. The goal is to have people know Jesus and to make an impact in your local community, in your local church. So this concept of big conferences or big events that you are capitalizing, I just simply believe it's not going to be as effective as you think. There's obviously 2 events that are going to be naturally more, I guess, big or more momentum, and we all know that it's Christmas and Easter. Those are not Super Bowl Sundays. That methodology or that mindset is the exact thing that I'm talking about. That you are putting 100% of your energy on 2 events rather than putting 100% effort and energy on every single service. Because the reality is if you had a high quality product and you had a 7-star experience in your church, I'll talk about that in a moment, you shouldn't have to bank off of two specific services or 2 Sundays to grow and to create momentum in your church. Because, by the way, it's not actually creating a false narrative or a false momentum, because what ends up happening is you have this event peak on that Sunday, so attendance goes up, impact goes up, everyone's great. And then what happens the week after? You have an event hangover. So Monday hits, Tuesday hits, Wednesday hits. You're emotionally down, you're tired, you feel like, oh my gosh, you take the next Sunday off from preaching, you have your youth pastor or your executive or whoever preaching. And man, that's just now we're just going down because we put all of our energy and focus on an event, not a service. I believe if we put, again, a 7-star experience, what does that mean? Anytime you as a leader, as a human being, let's just remove leadership in church for a moment. Let's just hypothetically story here. You take an Uber, 99% of the time, you're going to give a 5-star. The only reason you would give a 3 or 4-star is because your life was dependent on it. It was the worst experience of your life. The person was going off the rails, and you were just in a horrible environment. The only reason why you would leave less than a 5-star in a restaurant is because you got absolutely sick and you had the worst experience of your life. Most humans just leave 5 stars because why? It's just easy and convenient. What would happen if you focused so much on the quality of your service and the hospitality of your team on that Sunday that people are emailing you to leave you 6 and 7 stars, which means they're going above and beyond. They're telling their friends, they're sharing with their neighbors, you have to go to this church. It's going to change your life. The people are so kind. The people are so authentic and genuine. I promise you, if you focused more energy towards your actual service and the people serving and the culture that you're leading rather than just a big event, you would be more effective. So I believe that's going to be declining in 2025. Number 2, broadcast style communication. So let's get into this. This will be fun. Traditional one-way communication like announcements, email blasts, newsletters, social media posts are, in my opinion, fading. People want to interact. People want to ask questions and feel involved with your community. If you need to think of every single social media page as a community. You need to think of every single channel, anyways, as a specific group of community. So your email newsletter is not just, oh, that's the people who go to my church. Think about that as its own community. Your Instagram page is its own community. So when you create content and your creative director is designing stuff, they need to be thinking about how does this massively impact the community that it's reaching, which is its own audience. So for us, just doing blanket posts or blanket invites, and we have an episode coming out talking strictly about marketing strategy, but something that, again, I'm perpetually believing that is declining or already completely gone is this concept of lead pastor-centric marketing. So people are not bought in simply because of the lead pastor's personality anymore, in my opinion. And if it isn't, it's declining because what's happening is we're putting a specific person as the primary brand of the church. Because you got to think of it as actually marketing. Like you have a brand, whether you want to have one or not. What ends up happening is you try to say we're not a brand. So then what ends up happening is you just have a bad brand. Your marketing's weird. You don't have the same typefaces or logos and everything's different. The colors aren't right. You're posting graphics every single day on your Instagram, so your feed doesn't look great. Your TikTok is just not, it's not even, it probably doesn't exist. So we're perpetually behind when it comes to just general marketing strategy. But I think something that is absolutely dying is this concept of broadcast style communication. It's just blanket statements. It's just an open invite to a city. Newsflash, nobody cares about your specific events or your service times or anything online. Think about that. When you scroll online and you just see ads, what are you doing? You're scrolling past them. You're skipping the YouTube video ads every single time. Because why? It's an interruption. I don't want to be an interruption. I want to be integration. I want to integrate into the community. I want to integrate into your life. I want to be your friend. I want to invite you into my life, not just invite you into a service. If you are just inviting people to services, they're not going to show up. But if you invite people into your life, they can experience the life change that you experience, which is Jesus, which can obviously happen in a service. And I believe that services are going to grow, churches are going to grow if we continue to focus on substance, if we focus on value, if we focus on intentionality and excellence, more than just blanket statements or Canva templates. All of that stuff, I believe, again, generic is not the move in 2025. Next one is top-down leadership models. So hierarchical models where decisions come solely from the top are shifting towards collaborative leadership, empowering teams to lead in their areas, encouraging lay people to have an active role in decision-making, fosters a church culture that feels more incredible and engages people at every. This is, I believe, across the board. This is church, this is business, this is team, this is relationships. The top-down leadership model doesn't work. It's never been effective. If you want to, the leader of all will be the servant of all, will not be the decision maker of all. If you want to be controlling, if you want to have to be the decision maker for every single thing, I promise you that is going to be a team that isn't bought into you for sure, but then also is slowly not bought into their position, their role, and even their church. They're going to find somebody who listens to them. They're going to find somebody who empowers them. They're going to find somebody who trusts them to make a decision. When you put somebody in leadership, you are not putting them so they can make 80% of the decisions, or honestly 80% of the work, so you can have the credit. Kind of goes back to the pastor being the brand. The pastor's not the brand. The sentiment of it is, though, is there is a lot of control. And to be honest, I believe that there's a generational change happening where boomers and even, to be honest, millennials, it just seems to be a little over-controlling than the generation Z, and then you have Alpha, obviously, growing up and being in high school now. Like, they're here. It's not in 20 years. This is here. And to be honest, if you think about it, this isn't a new idea. This is the principle of Jesus. Jesus, if he wanted to make every decision and he wanted to have every single insight on the church, he would have never ascended and left the Holy Spirit with us. The Holy Spirit, and he said, you will do greater things than I. So for me, I believe this is a clear example of being a leader who delegates, who trusts, who empowers, and obviously we have to have the Holy Spirit. Without the Holy Spirit, we're not even building the church. Jesus said he will build the church and the gates of hell will not prevail. Okay, so he's building the church through me, which means he's using me to continue to lead and pastor people to make decisions. I am not the final decision maker on every single thing in our church. Neither is our lead pastor. Neither is any of our directors or people. Because why? We're continually building people and helping people think. That is what you are as a leader. You help people think. You don't honestly give them answers or conclusions all the time. You help people self-discover conclusions and answers through the Bible and through wisdom. Wisdom is just knowledge applied. So a lot of leaders, in my opinion, have knowledge, they just don't apply it. So for me, this top-down leadership centered around, to be honest, a kingdom mindset. We have one king. You cannot have two kings in one castle. We have one king, and this concept of the holier than the leader who is removed from the congregation. Again, I just had Pastor Brendan Brown on, and he said, we need more leaders smelling like sheep, not green rooms. And I just can't agree with that. I believe in 2025, you're going to see that kind of shift. And to be honest, it has been shifting the last couple of years. I believe this concept of green room culture being removed, and it is continually seeing that you can actually have real fruit in your ministry if you are involved with people, if you are helping people become decision makers and leaders. In my opinion, that is dying. The last three here, heavy reliance on traditional metrics. The two traditional metrics I want to talk about are attendance and giving. Thinking about these two metrics, to be honest, are not always the source of truth. Church health, primarily through attendance numbers and donations, overlooks the real signs of growth. Discipleship, community engagement, spiritual transformation. Metrics are broadening to include measures like spiritual growth, relational connections, volunteer engagement, and impact in the community. I think what's been so interesting with AI, and honestly even just the software development that's happening in the church movement, is we're actually starting to be able to gauge and track things that has never been trackable. It's always been more of a subconscious mindset, or like an idea on something rather than the actual source of truth. What's interesting is now we can actually gauge whether somebody's relationally connected, whether they are actually connected spiritually to our church. And to be honest, those two metrics are still important. Attendance and giving are absolutely still important. And I don't know if they're actually the most important, because showing up right now is not necessarily happening. We know that it's at like 1.4 times a month somebody's going to church. Okay, so somebody's not attending your service. How do we still impact their lives? Attendance is absolutely imperative. We should never forsake the gathering of saints. We should never forsake corporate worship and hearing a Bible-based message 1,000%. And I still believe that heavily reliance on those two metrics is going to be removed. I believe volunteer engagement is super important. How many people actually serve in your church? How many people are actually engaged with the community? How many people actually are serving and loving their neighbor? Because again, having big rooms, having a big church doesn't actually mean you're an effective church. Only reason we care about that metric, in my opinion, is to gauge whether we believe we're doing a good job or not. To me, that is not something that I'm caring about, or honestly, it's not impacting the value that I add to the local church. It's not impacting my identity as a believer of Jesus. As a son of Jesus, my identity is in him. My identity is not in how many people show up in seats on Sunday. How I can actually have metrics around whether I'm being an effective leader or not are our people rising up, are marriages healthy, are people being more honest with their leaders. It's all about engagement. This is the same. You think about this in social media. It doesn't matter if you have 10,000 followers and 0 likes. Likes, comments, shares is what we would call engagement in social media. In my opinion, we are going to see a drastic shift in caring about big attendance rather than big engagement. Engagement is everything. How many people are attending a small group? How many people are going in actual discipleship programs in schools? And again, it's all about relational and spiritual health. We've heard this 1,000 times, and I think I say it every single time. Healthy things grow, but so does bad things. Everything grows. Everything grows up or grows old. So when we think about this health, Sunday attendance is not a metric of health. Sunday metric is a byproduct of a lot of other things being healthy, like your individual leaders being actual disciples of Jesus. So heavy reliance on traditional metrics, sermon-centric Sundays as the only core offering. So you only having a Sunday sermon is not honestly going to be what I believe is happening. So that's always been the central experience, right? For many people, that's not enough to foster deep connections or holistic growth. Small groups, community service, one-on-one discipleship through the week allows people to experience church beyond just Sunday, meeting needs for relationships and spiritual support. So we got to think bigger, not just bigger in numbers, but what I'm saying is bigger in intentionality. So if the only thing you offer is a huge worship service and no opportunities for people to meet and find friends, that is not going to be a growing church. I'm telling you that right now. Because why? People need at minimum 6 friends within the first 6 months, or they will not come back to your church. You have 6 months to get them 6 to 7 friends at minimum. And a definition of friend is not just somebody that they serve with on Sunday. A definition of friend is they're hanging out during the week. They're spending time together. They're in a group text together. They have similar things they like, whether that's sports or music or restaurants. You just have to be able to assimilate people into relationships, not just assimilate people into seats. If you want a big church, that's fine. I'm just telling you, your retention rate is going to be real low. Your churn rate is going to be real high. And to be honest, what you're seeing is a one-generation church, which happens historically when somebody doesn't understand that relationships and depth of friendships actually the most important thing that you can provide and facilitate. I can provide and facilitate thousands of different things, but if I'm going to focus on one thing, obviously, is the opportunity for somebody to meet Jesus for the very first time. So salvation, yes, That is pretty obvious. When I think about something else, though, how can I facilitate depth of relationships, friendships? And to be honest, I think this is what the church should be known for, the way we love one another. A lot of people misquote that scripture and just say they're going to know us by the way we love one another. If we can't even figure out how to love each other, how are we supposed to love people who don't know Jesus? How are we supposed to love people who aren't Christian? So for me, I believe this is going to be a decline. I believe just having a Sunday sermon that doesn't apply to anyone in the church and them leaving and going back into the world, and the 6 other days that they're not in church, they don't live it, which is, to be honest, pretty evident in our culture right now. There's people who attend your church but aren't living anything that you're teaching because why? It's not applicable, and we're not facilitating relationships and friendships and community. Every church in the world uses the word community, but we don't even know how to define what that means. Just showing up on Sundays, to be honest, just serving on Sundays is not enough. It's not enough for our friends. It's not enough for our people. People are hurting. People are broken. People need authentic friends, and they're going other places to find it, so I believe the church should be the place. Outreach is separate from everyday life. Traditional outreach methods that feel like isolated initiatives, such as service projects, or handing out tracts, are fading in favor of a lifestyle of outreach. Churches are now focused on equipping members to live missionally in their everyday lives, prioritizing discipleship and serving others. So again, what I'm saying is these concepts of these big serve days are important. We're doing one in a couple of weeks because our school that we're doing church in has partnered with us. It's a really awesome opportunity. And we are making sure every Christian who goes to our church is equipped to be a person who loves well, who can share the gospel, who can serve and love their neighbor the 7 days out of the week. It's not banking off of an outreach ministry. Should not, in my opinion, that is what is declining, is this concept of having an evangelism ministry or having an outreach ministry. No, you are called to go and reach your neighbor. You are called to go into the world and make disciples of all nations, okay? That is your calling and mandate. That is not a personality. That is not a gifting. Some people have the gift of evangelism. I understand that. What I'm saying is that does not mean that you're not called to not reach your neighbor. You are absolutely, you live in your county, you live in your neighborhood for a specific reason. That is to reach your neighbor. So for us, we have to be a church who continues to educate and teach and model what it looks like to reach your neighbor. To be honest, it always goes introspective before we can ever teach it, right? So for you as a pastor, when is the last time you sat down and got coffee with somebody who doesn't believe what you believe? When is the last time you had somebody at your dinner table who completely doesn't vote like you vote, doesn't think like you think, doesn't even want to go to your church, but just simply wants to have a friend? If you can tell me that you've done that perpetually, I promise you your church is living it as well. Because they're following you. They're following your example. So again, outreach as a separate than everyday life, to be honest, is going to be going down the drain, in my opinion. We got to be people who aren't using initiatives or ministries as an excuse to not do something. I believe we're going to see a movement of Christians who simply serve their neighbors. So again, general strategies here: prioritizing authentic relationships, community impact, and mission-driven engagement over institutional growth are, in my opinion, are the things that are going to be setting the tone for this year. So I'm going to go through these. Again, these are things that I'm seeing that are going to be declining in 2025, that if, again, we can get ahead of it, it's 2 months away from 2025. So I believe we're already here. But event-centered focus. The era of just having a lot of events or hoping conferences grow your church is over. Broadcast style communication. Again, we're going to do one about simply just marketing in a couple weeks, but we got to stop with this blanket statement. We got to think about each individual channel as its own group of people. Top-down leadership models. This kingdom mindset is over. We have one king. You are not a king. You are a servant. You are the CSO of your organization. You are the chief servant officer. Heavy reliance on traditional metrics. Attendance and giving are important, and I don't think they're going to be as important as we think anymore. Volunteer engagement, relational connections, spiritual growth are here. Sermon-Centric Sundays. We have to offer opportunities for people to make a difference and have authentic relationships because it's not happening on Sundays. And outreach is not going to be separate from our actual lives. It is going to be our mission, not just a ministry in our church. So again, these are just a few thoughts. Again, I'm not saying these are absolute truths. I'm not prophetically speaking this over you on YouTube or podcast. What I'm saying is these are just blinkers that I'm seeing. Over the last 10 years, I've spent my life building the church. I have done coaching with churches and leaders all over the world, and it's still the same thing. We need to preach the gospel. We need to preach Jesus or go home. The message doesn't end with a gospel presentation. It is not a sermon. It is a TED Talk. Jesus is the only message we have. He is the only hope. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Make Jesus famous again. That's our goal, to make him the goal, to make him the message. You're not the message. You're not the brand. Jesus is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. We are just vessels. Vessels don't need to be clean. They just need to be empty. I'm an empty vessel God's going to use, and God's going to use you. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I believe, again, if you would just pray about these and sit in these, I believe they'll add tremendous value to you. If you can, subscribe, maybe leave a comment on one of these that has added the most value to you. We'll see you next week.